Hi everyone, it's Heath with OptionStrat, and I'm here to talk about some ways to use options flow for trading. In the previous videos, I did some walkthroughs of what OptionStrat is and how the various features work. One of those videos is focused on our options flow platform and how to use it. If you aren't familiar with it, you may be wondering what some of the various colors and terms in this video mean. So I was just going back and watching that video before this one. You can find a link to that in the description. To get started, I want to explain what options flow actually is. If you're familiar with the platform or saw a previous video, you know that options flow is this giant list of unusual trades that come in throughout the day. But where do these trades come from, and what determines which trades are shown and which are not? It all starts with data from actual trades on the various option exchanges in the US. OptionStrat scans every single trade, whether it's made from a fellow retail trader or a professional on behalf of a company. It then takes these trades and pieces together the larger orders that they originate from. When you're trading a few calls or puts by yourself, it's easy to match your order against someone else who is taking the opposite position. However, professionals that are trading hundreds or thousands of contracts at once will have their orders matched against many open orders in the market across multiple exchanges and prices at once. Essentially, one order gets split up into multiple trades as the order is matched against other participants who are taking the opposite position. Once we have these consolidated trades, we can then analyze them to see how large and aggressive they are compared to past activity, and combine that with various internal metrics to determine if it's something worth showing to you through the platform. For example here, these trades all came in at nearly the same time, and many of them were for this one contract on Apple. These trades took place on various exchanges, executing at the best price of 2.28, as well as some of the later trades that push the price upwards. OptionStrat pulls this info together and indicates that a trade of around $68,000 for these Apple calls was made. It then looks at various metrics like the size, how far out of the money, and how aggressive it is, and uses that to determine if this should be shown. Apple frequently sees trades that are upwards of over $100,000. So this is on the smaller side, but it is out of the money and it is aggressive, so it could be a good candidate to show in the flow. Moving on, let's talk about how this info can be used to actually trade. Everyone has their own styles of trading, whether it's day trading or swing trading, buying long calls and puts, or do something safer like a spread, or even just trading shares. There are a lot of ways to do this, but personally, these are the two methods that I use in my own trading. One method is using options flow to find new ideas, essentially using it to find trending stocks with high amounts of directional flow, and then researching them to determine if it's a good opportunity. Like I explained on the last slide, these are actual trades that others are making, and it's critical that you find out why they're making these trades. The other method I use is to confirm or deny my own existing trading ideas. For example, you may already have some favorite stocks that you day trade and are knowledgeable about, or you found a stock and it has a good setup already. You can then use options flow to make sure you're trading with the flow and not against it. Notice how both of these methods involve doing some additional research. If there's one thing that I stress the most in this video, is that you can't blindly follow flow. You need to combine it with other forms of trading and make an educated decision on why you're entering the trade, as well as how to manage it. Diving deeper into the first method, when you're on the OptionStrat website or app and looking for stocks this method, what should you be looking for? The way I do it is using the summary tab, which shows the stocks with the highest amount of bullish or bearish flow for the day. I also filter out ETFs since they can be so unpredictable, and sometimes I filter out large caps since smaller stocks tend to move big on speculation, which I'll show some examples of in a bit. I mentioned in the last video, but just a reminder since I get this question a lot, this list is sorted by how strong the flow is, not necessarily by how many orders or how much volume in dollars there is. What I look for are stocks on either side that have around 5 trades at least. This number should increase as the day goes on, so if it's midday, maybe look for stocks with 10 orders. If the market just opened, 3 or 4 is okay as well. I click on these stocks to go to the flow page for them and confirm that there is a lot of consistent flow in one direction. If so, this is good news, but like I mentioned, it needs to be combined with more research, so it's not a signal to go in or to go all in just yet. Throughout the past week, I've been taking a break from some development to watch the flow and gather some examples for this video. I only really made notes on 1 or 2 stocks per day because all of these examples were trades I either took or I was watching and considering entering. That way you can see my thought process on them. The first example is this play on Owl. It had an amazing return for the first call. Obviously, you're wanting to wait for some additional flow to come in, so you wouldn't have been able to enter as early as this trade. However, it took a little while before this trade really took off. Pretending you're only seeing the first 5 trades here though, how do you know if you should enter a trade like this or not? So let's open up the chart for the stock. These are some examples some screenshots from Thinkorswim. They do go up until the end of the day, even the next day in the screenshot. So if you're looking at the first 5 to 10 trades in the flow, you're obviously not going to be seeing the future here, but I'm just including it so you can see how the trade played out. I keep my charts pretty clean. There are a ton of indicators you can use, but I don't use them very often, and I've taken everything off for these screenshots besides the volume and implied volatility. Personally, I have best success with simple support and resistance lines. I won't give a whole tutorial on how to do technical analysis here, but I'll try and describe a bit of my process for identifying those levels. So first, I always go back and look at the yearly, monthly, or weekly charts to check if the stock is at an all-time high and see how it's performed over the past few weeks and days. In this case, it's been in a steady uptrend and has tried to break this 14.25 to 14.30 resistance level a few times. It managed to break it and came down soon after, but this time around it was using that same level as support, and the strong flow was coming in around this time, so it gives some confidence that this would be a good entry point. However, there also isn't a ton of volume on the stock. There's a lot of volume today, but not necessarily usually. There was also no news on the stock that I could find. I searched around a bit and couldn't really find anything going on that could explain why it was gaining so much on this day. It did peak around 120, which makes sense as it was trying to break big levels like $15, which can always be difficult. This will be your first sign to sell. One thing to note about this is more people were buying options on it as word spread, which caused the demand for options to increase, which likewise increases implied volatility. This actually caused the price of the contract to continue to go up even after the stock started going down. So you could have waited a bit and actually still gotten out with a good profit, seeing as the option didn't reach a peak until around 150, whereas the stock was already down a bit by then. Also note that these times are in mountain time, so there are 2 hours behind market time. Moving on to another example, CLOV was a really popular stock for the past week. It had a ton of bullish flow in the morning of this particular day. It was actually one of the first symbols I looked into that day, and I actually wrote about it on our Discord when it broke the 9.40 resistance level. Going to the charts over here, this one's a little more complicated, but of course there was a lot of bullish flow, which is always a good sign to look into something. There's plenty of volume on this, and it bounced from an opening sell-off here and then broke that area that I had bounced off of and broke through this resistance level. So looking at the 2-month chart, I identified 2 levels here. There's a 9.40 resistance level that it has tried to get over a few times. And then of course there is $10, which is like a big psychological level that can be hard to get over sometimes. It's bounced off that 3 times. So looking at those 2 levels over here, it managed to break that in the morning. There was a ton of flow coming in before that and a little bit after it. So this area right here is a really good place to enter. It then started heading for $10, which is where we would expect it to either bounce off of or continue to skyrocket through. In this case, it bounced off of it, and there was a lot of bearish flow coming in for a bit. It did start forming this channel here with some more bullish flow, getting higher highs here, and it tested $10 3 more times. I think right here, when it tested $10 the first time and then went down a bit, that would be a good chance to sell. You could wait it out and see what would happen if it tried to get it more times. There was tons of social media chatter about this stock. Lots of people who were hoping that it would break through $10. And it tried a few more times and it wasn't able to. It made it over once here, but it came right back down. It only made it to 10.1. So seeing it do that a few times, I think most people would want to sell by then, assuming that they bought in at a good entry over here. Or you could also buy in maybe when it bounced off of the level that it previously reached around here. That could be another good area. I stopped watching the stock after it bounced off 10 a few times. However, I did come back to it later in the day, and it actually managed to make it past 10 and ran all the way up to $11.13. So those that did hold through could have made a really, really good gain. But even if you did only buy here and sell some over here, you could have easily made close to 100%, and that would be the much safer way of doing it. Moving on to another example, GSAT. There were a lot of rumors around GSAT and Apple in the past week. Essentially, Apple has talked about adding some kind of satellite calling capability to their phones. So if you're lost in the mountains somewhere, you could dial emergency services using satellite instead of cell signal. And of course, they would need to contract with some kind of satellite provider in order to do that. So in this case, there's been a lot of rumors about GSAT being that provider. There was some good flow in the morning. That's what we're looking for. Lots of repeated flow. The contracts did great. A lot of them from anywhere from 50 to 100%, depending on where you entered. Looking at the charts for it, this one I liked because it was actually moving on news. It wasn't just being hyped up on social media and having people pouring into it because of that. It was moving on actual news. There's, as always, strong bullish flow here. There was also a lot of strong bearish flow later in the day, which would be around this area that you may want to sell in. However, the legitimacy of the news here was kind of questionable. There also weren't really any good technical levels. It's at an all-time high, so it's kind of uncharted territory. But going back to the news, there were a lot of reports early in the morning saying that there was an FCC permit issued that was showing GSAT as Apple's customer. However, if you went to the site and actually looked at that permit, nowhere does it mention Apple. So later in the day, I saw a lot of news reports correct this and change their headlines to not completely say that Apple was their customer, but to say that it's a rumor, because that's what it is. There was nothing in there indicating that it was for sure. There was also this article that was published a week prior, actually, during one of these other run-ups, where someone who is very familiar with the GPS industry, it's not really GPS, but it's some kind of satellite calling. They're very familiar with that industry, and they were explaining how just because Apple has chips that can operate on a certain frequency doesn't actually mean that they're implementing some kind of satellite calling. And Globalstar satellites are very old and might not support what they need. And so they're very skeptical that this was actually happening. And so the news might not be true, but you don't necessarily need the news to be true to make a good day trade out of it. There was just a lot of people pouring into this, so it ended up working out pretty well. Another example is Moderna. Moderna had some positive news in the morning about a booster shot that they were developing that would be effective against COVID-19 as well as the flu. So there was a ton of bullish flow in the morning. There was a good headline of some actual news, and these calls ended up doing pretty well. Looking at the charts for it, similar to the last one, there wasn't really a good technical setup. Moderna has been going up for the longest time. I didn't include a year chart here, but it's gone up something like 300% in a year. There was this one period where it had hit all-time highs, and there were some negative reports about how overvalued it was. But besides this little hiccup here, it's really just been going up month over month. For the technical setup, some could say that it broke the 440 level, but it is moving on real news, which is good. Only the last two that were kind of questionable. And there is a ton of really strong flow in the morning, so maybe waiting for it to consolidate for a second, dip a little bit, and then get in is a good idea. And then you could have sold really at any point during the day and made a pretty good profit. Next up, I want to talk about using it to confirm existing ideas. So in this case, if you have a stock and you have a plan kind of already, you can use flow to check that and make sure that you're not trading against the flow. So in order to do this, you can go ahead and filter the flow down to that particular symbol. You can also use the historical search functionality to search over the past few days or the past week, and then combine this with news and your own knowledge of the stock and your already existing idea. For example here, Nvidia last Monday was Labor Day, so the reason that I'm looking at this on Tuesday is because of that. I was looking at selling some covered calls on Nvidia because I own some and want to make some additional income. So when you have a covered call, you're looking for the stock to stay neutral, maybe move up a little bit. You don't want it to go beyond your strike price because then your stock is called away. You also don't want it to go down because since you own the shares, you'd be losing money there. Although I'm fine if Nvidia goes down a little bit, it's always recovered, and I'm planning on holding it for a while. But it'd also be fine if a little bit of mine were called away. So the flow here was very mixed, mostly negative actually. This is sort of an indicator to stay away from when looking for ideas. However, for writing covered calls, this is good. You know, if you were trying to find an idea on Nvidia, like, well, it's mixed, so you don't really know what to do. But in this case, this is actually what I'm looking for. I want it to be sort of mixed because I already have an idea of selling calls, and this is sort of good for me. If it goes down a little bit, I'd be fine with that. You can even see here there's some calls being sold, which might be covered calls. I'm not sure. I ended up selling a 235 call for the 17th, and it's already up like 70%. So it's doing pretty well. Hopefully it will expire worthless. There's many short call strategies you can see in here. So that's the exact trade I want to make. So I'm basically using this to sort of confirm that I am doing the right thing. If it turned out that Nvidia had a ton of bullish flow on Tuesday, then I may think twice about selling a covered call that week, or I may do a strike that's farther away. Lastly, I have an example here on Shopify. Shopify has been hovering around $1,500 for quite some time. So it's easy to do plays on it that can really go in either direction and just wait until they're profitable. If you're doing a long call or put, I would advise against that because you have a limited amount of time and it's decaying quickly. But something like a spread is a lot easier because your time decay is helpful when it's profitable actually. There was mostly bearish flow this week, so you could consider a bearish spread or do covered calls, just like I was talking about with Nvidia. Unfortunately, I don't own 100 shares of Shop. It's a very expensive stock now, but that could be another idea you could try. The reason I picked Shopify to look at here is because I've owned it for quite some time and I'm very familiar with the industry. So if you have any stocks that you know a lot about, like you're always paying attention to the news, maybe you personally use their products or their software and you're very familiar with it, those kind of stocks are ideal for this because you already have an idea of like what's going to happen. You're very familiar with how it trades, how it may be always flat or how it may always fall when hitting a certain level. You can trade your normal ideas based on that and just supplement it with flow to make sure that you're making the right decision. If flow is completely opposite to what you were thinking about doing, then you might want to reconsider. But if it's sort of showing the same sentiment that you were already thinking, it'll give you that extra confidence boost to do the trade that you were thinking about. So in summary, you want to use flow as either a starting point to find new ideas or to give you that confidence to enter a trade or maybe wait or exit an existing trade based on an idea they already have. In either situation, it's so important that you use other resources to find the why behind the flow. Remember that flow is simply based on the trades of others. You don't necessarily know why they're making that trade. It could be a hedge against another position. They could be exiting a position. you're just really not sure. So that's why you need to try and find out some reasons for why they're making these trades based on news, technical analysis. You can use fundamentals and reports, or just your own expertise, having watched the stock before, having some knowledge of it based on your own experiences. You just need to combine it with some extra information to make sure you really have an idea of what's going on. And you also want to make sure that you're managing your trades correctly. A lot of new traders will make a trade, and it's only after they make the trade, and maybe it starts to go down, that they think about how they should exit it. And then they end up panic selling. Before you place that trade, you should think about at what point you're going to sell, or at what point you're going to sell for a loss. You just need to figure out and have a plan before you get into it. With most desktop trading software, you can set stop losses and take profits automatically when you place a trade. So definitely look into that and have that plan ahead of time, preferably based on some actual research. That's pretty much it for now. If you have any questions, feel free to email us or join our free Discord chat to ask questions. Our contact email and a link to the chat are available on the website or mobile app. If I get a chance to do some more day trading, I will make sure to do some more videos like this in the future to show you my thought process behind making trades. I hope you learned something for now. Have a good day, everyone, and good luck with your trading.